G'day friends and fans, welcome to Dave Talks Off Ukraine War Update for the 17th of August 2026. As the war continues, I shall continue to bring you the comprehensive news and coverage from both sides of the war. And we start with the war of words. Ukrainian pop star. This is the Times, the British Times, not the New York Times. Now, the Times has given Olana Polakova a platform where she talks about singing on the front line, working with Zelensky, and why her music is cathartic in the darkest times. She has created a political firestorm since this interview. She admits she was hired. She admits when the war broke out, she was fired, along with thousands of others, as the entire entertainment industry in Ukraine was closed on Zelensky's orders. Those who were rehired were only done so for propaganda. Those who would serve the government for propaganda. And since then, she has spoken out. Most of the Western world has not reported her words. They have reported that she has spoken out, but they condemn her. But they won't tell you why. And so I'm going to tell you why. Though you will see you'll see about this much in the Western media. It's pretty. You don't get to be a pop star. You cannot be a pop star, almost. No matter how good you sing, you're almost guaranteed, if you don't get that surgery, you ain't getting a job. If you don't get those hair extensions, you ain't getting that job. If you don't do the nails thing, you ain't getting that job. If you don't say what the government tells you to say, you ain't getting a job. And that's pretty much what she's done. She's told you that's how the celebrity industry works now. You don't get viral unless you speak what YouTube approves. Ukraine pop star spoke out against the growing climate affair in Ukraine. She spoke out against what she sees as a concentration camp for political prisoners. That the people could eventually become too frightened to speak out, and society, where witnessing something such as somebody being seized in the streets, everyone afraid to intervene. Her comments were directed directly at the government that employs her. The government that used her, and she says has used her. That numerous people showed videos of men being grabbed in the streets and no one doing anything. Not the government that she thought served the people. Zelensky's own party is called Servant of the People. He is all but communist in name. He is a communist. He calls himself a liberal reformist. Yeah, so did Xi Jinping, the man who directed China to invade Vietnam. No. She has spoken out against forced mobilization, and since then she has faced nothing but backlash from government supporters, criticizing her of reinforcing Russian propaganda. This accusation is significant in wartime Ukraine, where information warfare is part of the war. Then if people even legitimately criticize, there are legitimate criticisms of Ukraine, which I himself, after years of coming under attack, I cannot in good conscience support Ukraine because legitimate criticisms of how they handled the war got me nothing but constant attacks, got me nothing but videos taken down, got my channels hacked. I have had people hack my account and delete videos because they are that salty. They are that salty because they cannot handle the truth. Millions have supported Polovokia. Millions of Ukrainians still support her, but they are the people of Ukraine. They are not the Europeans who want war. They are not the Americans who want war, or any other person who wants this war. All the people who want this war hate her, but none of them are Ukrainian. They include my own government and media are attacking her for criticism of Zelensky's government. But she argued Zelensky is no longer a democratic reform. He's not democratic and he's not reforming Ukraine. He's deforming it to the point of corruption, to the point of political repression, that the government treats its critics as the enemy. And his presidency during wartime is criminal. She brought up Gonzo Lira, which most of people have forgotten, and many others that no one even cared to mention. All political prisoners, all murdered by the Zelensky regime by proxy. Many have told you how the Ukrainian government knows police routinely have prisoners killed as part of blood sport, where prisoners are set against each other and people bet on the outcomes so they can reduce the number of prisoners, so that the Prison Management Bureau can pocket the excess. They say they got 4,000 prisoners, a few die, but they don't report it till next month because they get the money for those 4,000 prisoners, not the free. Yeah, it's the political human cost of the war has made her feel betrayed, that Ukraine's mobilized system is feeding ordinary Ukrainians into what? No, it's a proxy war. And New Zealand continues to support Ukraine. Yeah, Polovokia, I believe, is now living in New Zealand, and along with her manager / handler, I suppose, where she did a interview, and yes, it ended up only being, and this is New Zealand. New Zealand affects the war. How does the war affect New Zealand? Well, they get to, when a country fighting for democracy and freedom, it stands with that country, allegedly. But when that country is not a democracy or stops being one, how can they remain silent when they say they are supporting Ukraine fight for democracy, when Ukraine isn't a democracy? And don't give me, it's a Republican argument, because it's not. Yeah, because North Korea is a republic, a democratic republic. Yeah, we have the Democratic Republic of West Ukraine, just like we have the Republic of North Korea. We have the Republic of East Ukraine and West Ukraine. And they argue with each other. They never liked each other, never gotten along. So what's wrong with them splitting up? For New Zealand, it's like the North and South Island, but it's not. Because North and South Island, though were two different countries, technically, they were still part of a Polynesian slash similar ethnic group. And so you could say the same about Russians and Slavs and Ukrainians. But, again, New Zealanders don't get the subtle difference. It would be like two Maori tribes. They did not consider themselves one country. They consider themselves separate countries. And some Maoris of North and South Island do consider themselves separate from New Zealand in the first. So even New Zealand does not grasp its own politics, yet it tries to insinuate and transpose its politics on the Ukraine. Why? Because it's self-justification. In order to justify your own situation, you use others as a proxy. Just like liberals say, oh, but bees do this, or oh, this goat on this island had sex with another male goat. This male goat had sex on this island once with other male goats. So therefore, all these 600 instances of animal homosexuality means that homosexuality is normal. But it's not the majority, therefore it can't be normal. And if it was the majority, there would be no more of that species would die out, which is what's happening to humanity. So, why should New Zealand care? Because if you don't care, you fall into the same trap, where governments will talk you into a dictatorship in the name of national security. Wait a minute, isn't that what they accuse every Republican of doing? Well, it's almost if every left-winger... it's almost if every accusation by the left is a confession. Tell me in the comments below, what do you think? Is every accusation a confession? So, let me just check the date on this post, because, yeah, it is today. 1. August apology, August interview, August apology. She's trying to stand by both. What's happened? Well, she's apologising for her remarks comparing UK to a concentration camp. In her second interview, by the way, the first interview, she said, anyone can be abducted by the streets. No one will stand up to them. Why? Because everyone is thinking it's the Territorial Recruitment Centre, or it's not the Territorial Recruitment Centre. Is it normal or not? People's concept of good and bad have blurred. It's already like a concentration camp. So they're reporting slightly different words, but this is her words, not the media's words. So you immediately understand New Zealand was engaged in pro-Ukrainian propaganda and trying to soften Olga's stance. But her own stance was a confused young person who was asked to read a statement by the Ukrainian government, and she could not stand by that statement, but the Times went ahead and published it anyway. So she tried to retract it and tried to clarify the position, right? That she's not against Ukraine's freedom, but she's just trying to say Ukraine doesn't have freedom. But it's a heated debate. And her publicist accused Podvagner of not seeing the elephant in the room, namely that Russia's attack is the root cause. No! Ukraine's war on ethnic Russians is the root cause. You can't have Russian attack on Ukraine without bringing up what happened the day before, or the day before that, or the day before that. It goes back to the 2014 civil war, illegal coup. Oh no, not all coups are illegal. They're only illegal when they're not done by the CIA. All coups by the CIA, legal and lawful, democracy. Sorry, I forgot the propaganda. There's just so much of it these days. So, as you can see, nepotism and so she supported someone who opposes the war, advocates for LGBTQ rights, and was accused of associating with good Russians. Yeah, quote unquote. So she comes back with this statement. So she was signed up without prior knowledge of what was going to happen. She didn't know how the internet would respond. She didn't sign up for political projects. These were all someone else's nonsense and sick imagination. She's not about party or politics, period. So what's next? Yes, she believes her words was too strong. She shouldn't have used them. But you notice she's not backing down on her core argument. She was speaking up for people held in captivity, people kidnapped. She is not backing away from what she said earlier. She's only backing away from comparing Ukraine to a concentration camp. She said that was too harsh. But she didn't say it was a good place. She hasn't backed away from the statement about political corruption. And of course, people are going to say, you're producing Russian propaganda. Well, if you have to keep saying that, isn't it about time you looked in the mirror and asked, are you repeating propaganda? Are you having an emotional response right now and forgetting that this individual admits to being hired for propaganda for Ukraine, and she was speaking out against something that you would normally speak out against? She is not a right-winger. She advocates for peace and has been anti-war for quite some time. She is everything the left. She's a darling of the left. She's a LGBTQ activist. So don't tell me she's right-wing or pro-Russian, because she spoke out against Russia's handling of LGBTQ too. Yet Russia is still, right? There's still LGBTQs in Russia. Can you say that about Ukraine? How many Ukrainian LGBTQ activists? What happened to the LGBTQ Pride Parade? What happened to those people that were arrested? How many protesters are in Ukrainian prisons for protesting? If Donald Trump did that, you would be screaming, but it's your side, so you feel safe and comfortable. Yet, the left are watching their fellow leftists get imprisoned by a government that does not appear to be neither left nor right. When's the last time we saw a government that appeared to be neither left or right? 1933, Germany appeared to be neither left nor right. Now, iconic sports. I'm a huge advocate for women in women's sports. What can I say? Actually, can I say? Every time I look for something, there's something. These ads are very similar. Yeah, I was looking. What was I looking into? And I kept seeing this ad. Oh yeah. I was looking for you. Actually, what happened to the female Ukrainian sports team? Yeah. They're playing volleyball somewhere in Spain, I believe. They haven't returned to Ukraine. Yeah. A lot of Ukrainian sporting teams don't live in Ukraine, by the way. A lot of them do live in Spain. So while the Ukrainian men go off to war, all the Ukrainian women go off to OnlyFans. I mean, on women's spurts, of course. So as we look at the ongoing conflict on the battlefield, we do see changes in the Russian positions in Sumy, with expansion of the buffer zone in some places, with artillery and other attacks in Sumy. We do see not one peep. Now, before I continue, I'd like to point out Ukraine launched a massive attack on Moscow, and Moscow launched a massive attack in retaliation on Kiev. None of them are on this map today. None of them are mentioned anywhere other than Al Jazeera. Is Al Jazeera making stuff up? No, I actually found fragments of the news on Telegram, on the Russian militaries, and on the Ukraine. So something is going off. That Ukrainian map, again, is not updating the map. So don't take it as what you will. But unfortunately, the only way I can clear some of these discrepancies up is if I start making enough money to buy a news subscription to something like Ground. But I would need financial support, at least a year's confirmed support, to do that. But so far so good, in that I've been able to confirm that indeed there is a lot North Koreans are fighting with the Russians as of yesterday. When Zelensky says they're coming, no, they're already fighting and have been fighting for some time on the border, but against Ukrainian incursions. There is a big but there. Russia is using North Koreans as border guards. The Russian army is fighting on the front lines. There's a huge difference. Now, Kim did put out some sort of statement about how they want a Russian victory, the victory Russians, that they're giving technical and military support in order to gain valuable experience for the, they didn't say upcoming conflicts, for the continued security of the Democratic Republic of North Korea. Now, North Korea and South Korea are trying to forge an agreement where they agree to each other's statehood. Oh, why is that important? Well, Korea was only united by Japan. Before that, Korea was actually 3 states. And North Korea was much bigger than it used to be. But China now occupies parts of North Korea and call it Jinlan. So, we'll see what happens in that conversation, because that is a conversation Korea's often had, but often ignored by the West. Now, we have Russia yet again back here at Krasnoyarsk. They're closing the gap here on the buffer zone. They've taken a lot of territory in the buffer zone and continuing to span now along the border. They have broken out in other areas. They are pushing along here. Now, they have had incursions deeper, but for some reason, there's not a lot of push out. Now, we know why, because they're not having a lot of success in Kupiansk. But they've had some, and they're pushing back. And they are gaining territory in Kupiansk. Some of you said you can't see my mouse. That's true. I could barely see it myself, but I could see it on my recordings. I think it disappears and reappears. It's not caught every frame. But there, you can see it. I can sometimes see it. Alright, so maybe I should get a new mouse icon, hey? Maybe I should. Alright, so we have the battlefield situation here slowly squeezing. Very slowly, mind you. Nothing really going on here, though they are pushing. Same here, they are pushing. they're just not getting. Ukrainians aren't budging in a lot of places, but here and there they do crack, and there's been a bit of a crack here, a bit of a crack here. Remember that breach they were fighting over for the last few days, where Russian forces came over the river, Ukraine cut them off. Well, then they headed on the river, and yesterday they were fighting on the bridge. Russian forces are finally taking that area, cutting off this area here, leaving the only Ukrainian controlled crossing for this area here. As you can see, Russia is pushing the Ukrainians back, but not far and fast, and they are clogging up against towns. They are basically trench clearing. They're Russian assault forces, usually 6-man squads, grab a couple of drones, landmines, and go out, and they use those landmines and a couple of deck cords, sometimes some hand grenades. Sometimes they just leave the mine without the pressure detonator, so that anything that steps on it or any impact would likely to set off the mine. But you try and disarm a Russian mine, you strip off the tape, and then this little metal object goes flying past, and it's like, you don't get to say Holy Mary before it goes off. It's just, they got you 3 ways to Sunday. As soon as you see that hit the ground, if you're not out of there the following second, you're dead. No, I'm sorry. There's no disarming. You pull the tape off, pop goes the mine. You pull the dead cord, still pop goes the mine. Because it's shaken up. It's basically mercury fulminate heated up, and basically it's basically, if it doesn't go off, God likes you. God knows why, but God likes you. That doesn't go off. Because remember, this is an explosive. This is a 3-kilogram explosive pack. It's not an anti-human mine, okay? It's an anti-tank mine. 3 kilograms of explosive. It's to basically annihilate the trench. Now, the push here is slowing down, and the push here has been stalled for so long, they've pretty much forgotten there's a war on most of the time. But they do have, and Russia, no one knows how many dead Ukrainians and Russians there are in this area, because it's a tit for tat. And it's highly infiltrated. The Ukrainians can't come out of their trenches. They get hit by drones. They've been hit by drone wires from long-range, wired drones going overhead. Commanders will shoot them for leaving their post. So they got nowhere to go. And so they wait the inevitable. It's either a Russian patrol stumbles on them. So all the little firefights that go on along the front line, they don't get recorded. Graves don't get marked. Because Ukraine gets money for its army, so it's not going to tell you how many people were killed or injured. They made it a state secret. The push goes on, but they haven't moved. They haven't moved north, but they've moved in other areas. And regular Russian troops are back fighting in Koshtakovia as Ukraine continues to infiltrate despite the cauldron. Because they believe there's tunnel networks and still nighttime crossings, Ukrainians sneaking through the Russian lines, trying to push in and attack from behind. You have had infiltrations and firefights behind the lines. as well as the Russian army, slowly making progress, cutting off, rooting them out. Oh, I thought it would take a month. Now it's looking longer before Koshnikov. It's now looking like 3 months before the Russians even get anywhere close to clearing all these trenches in Koshnikovia, let alone all the Ukrainians that come in that period. But in other areas, they are continuing to push out, but no major town has fallen, and the battlefield remains pretty static in most places. However, the Russians are pushing back against the Ukrainian offensive and retaking a fraction of what they lost, but a fraction nonetheless, and they continue operations without almost, well, yeah, they securing a river crossing here, starting to secure the river here. They're in open territory. The Ukrainians are holding them back here, and here, and here. But they're going to start infiltrating through, eliminating the Ukrainian trenches, just like they're doing here, and either isolate or take the town. Isolate or take the town. This will be highly infiltrated. This area here will be highly infiltrated by both sides, trying to gnaw at each other. With the Ukrainians' objective, of course, to prevent them from getting to Orikov, and then the line will be probably held along these network of trenches that will run through pretty much the division of roads and properties, and God knows how many tunnels and bunkers. And then you're going to find that a lot of them are going to be standalone little networks. One of these 20 years' time, you'll be going on a tour of, the great tunnel. You'll see the great tunnel networks of Ukraine, just like the great tunnel works of Vietnam. Only when you go to see the great tunnel works, they show you a little pipe out of the ground and say there was a great tunnel network under it, but it was filled in. Take our word for it. And then they show you some of the little surface tunnels and trenches and say, it used to be all over the countryside, take our word for it. But yeah, Ukraine will be the same. You'll never get to see the truth. They will try to keep the truth from you as much as possible. And I bet you, and I bet you it's the same in Vietnam and in many places, these tunnels eventually do collapse or get collapsed by explosives. And there's going to be untold people buried alive in these tunnels. They don't want you to know what really happens, because the government fears that one day they'll have to force you into these tunnels. And people aren't going to go if they know that there's a high chance of not coming back out. People are going to be more and more resistant to war, thanks to the Ukraine war, thanks to the exposure of the so-called anti-war left exposing themselves as anything but. The only time the left oppose the war is when it doesn't suit them, right? If the war suited them, right? If it suited them, right? If this was America and Vietnam, they would be crying, poor Vietnam. If this was America invading Ukraine, poor Ukraine. Yeah. So don't tell me the left have morals or standards. They're just gutless, power hungry, incredibly, probably criminally craven, as well as do not estimate under how cunning they are. And yes, I do know I'm isolating half my audience, but remember, the left hate me. Look at me, right? They only support women and people of colour. Full stop. They will never, ever, they'll always tell you, oh, you're isolating half the audience. That's only because they're trying to force people to shut up. because we all know the left do not support anyone outside their ecosphere. Empire Valves. One word, empirevalves.myshopify.com, your one-stop shop for enchanting treasures based on my writing. There is the Emperor and the Empress. Thank you for your purchase, and moving on. As I said, Al Jazeera is reporting Ukraine's largest drone attack ever on Russia, including strikes in civilian suburbs of Moscow. Ukraine is bragging how it's killed, I don't know how many, but the Wildberries logistic hub near Moscow. Moscow claims to have intercepted 822 drones. Well, actually, TASS said 800, but so how did you know it was 822 if Russia says 800? Yes, you wrote this from a Ukrainian feed. That's why you're making it appear that you are neutral. If you wanted to be neutral, you'd include the Russian number, not the number given to you by Ukraine. Don't you love it when they lie? They obviously lie. They're all obviously lying. And yet the left will say, it's just Fox News talking points, and then pivot to Russian disinformation. It's all fake news. Yeah, CNN's fake news, that's for sure. But there you go. Ukraine is bragging about its largest attack on Russia. And according to their number one map, nothing to see here, folks. I know that's Kiev. But I showed you Moscow. Well, where's the Russian attack on Kiev? You all know what happens 3 hours after. You all know what happens 3 hours. I've shown you time and time again. 3 hours after an attack on Moscow, there's an attack on Kiev. There's been also Russian reports. There we go. Attacks Kryvyi, Odessa. But where's there's a bomb on Kramatorsk. So, reported by Russia, by the way. So, you're going to say, oh, read the Moscow Times. You go, oh, it must be disinformation because look, no attacks on Kiev. Yet go to other sources and you get the same thing. There were attacks on Kiev. Al Jazeera even says there were retaliations. You can look it up. There are many news sites that are now starting to use Russian retaliatory strikes. Now, there are several news stories that are almost buried. Now, Russia unleashed a firestorm. It attacked. Now, in response to energy sanctions and long-range drone strikes, right? Russia has unleashed a heavy bombardment and artillery firestorm across the front, targeting drone and missile sites. Due to energy sanctions by Ukrainian and Ukrainian drone strikes on Russian oil, Russia has targeted Ukrainian energy across the country. Crimean supply is under strain. Severe fuel crises have cancelled tourist bookings due to drone threats, and they have cut a lot of road travel to non-essential personnel. However, there is a mobilization fear. Kiev is warning of Moscow's preparations for a large-scale troop expanse ahead of winter. So for the first time, however, Russia every winter has trained a large army. And every winter, Ukraine has put out the same statement. So take it with a grain of salt that there will be a winter offensive because pretty much the first one fizzled out. The second one fizzled out. There hasn't been a real offensive. I know it's ridiculous to think that there was no real Russian winter offensive for 3 years. There has been attacks and ongoing operations, but no major offensive, no large-scale escalation during the winter. Now, overnight, Russia and Ukraine exchanged some of the heaviest airstrikes on each other. Now, mainstream media in Australia, but I looked at the article, it said 600 Ukrainian drones, but it was it was 11 hours ago, but 5 hours ago, Al Jazeera said 800, so the attacks were ongoing, and I'm not paying for the Sydney Morning Herald to find out exactly what time their article was published. However, YouTube audiences were primarily were not tuning in to read Olga's statement. A lot of Westerners have written off Olga as a Russian propagandist. Even though she's a leftist, an LGBTQ activist, you disagree with the mainstream left in America, even by 1%, or in the UK, and they cancel you. Right now, do you know the UK left and American left are at odds with each other? Because the UK left is going increasingly Islamic and abandoning LGBTQ stances. Yeah. So let that sink in, will you? Now, yesterday, Vladimir said that I want 10% of the US Patriot Interceptor stockpile. This would allow me to destroy all incoming Russian ballistic missiles. Now, the problem with this premise is, what is 10% of the US inventory stockpile? Well, according to some numbers, that would only be 720 missiles. The Ukraine would use those, on average, anywhere between 50 to not up to 90. So, and to stop all of them, they would have to fire at least 90 to 120. So they'd burn through US stockpiles very quickly, even if they had all of them. And what about the Middle East? If US stockpiles were redirected to Ukraine, that would leave other areas vulnerable. And you would have no build-up in the Philippines, no build-up in South Korea, and no build-up in Taiwan. The US administration has expressed concern over handling of Patriot missiles, in the fact that they've been firing Patriot missiles at small aerial targets, which included surveillance drones, which could have been shut down by or ignored. Because the surveillance... Yeah. And that also the US must preserve its own strategic missile reserves. In order... Yes. There's also size and scale of manufacturing limits. Russia has ramped up its domestic production of ballistic missiles, outpacing the rate at which interceptors can be supplied or built, according to the Kiev Independent. There's also production bottlenecks. Even if Kiev got off the ground today producing missiles, right, it will still take them 2 years to scale up advanced manufacturing to the point where they can offer 1% of US stockpiles. Again, this is according to Kiev Independent and other sources, that it takes a significant amount of time and will not be an immediate fix. And of course, interceptors can only protect the local radius where the Patriot is stationed. This leaves 80% of Ukrainians' border unprotected from, and the rest of Russia. So if Russia can destroy 80% of Ukraine, not 100%, would Russia say, oh, we're going to lose the war because we can't destroy 20% of Ukraine. I say, people, get that man, fire that man. Now, prioritization. Ukraine has clustered time and time again its sparse interceptors around vital hubs, leaving others exposed, regardless of theoretical stockpile percentages. According to the Atlantic, it basically is saying they're going to get through. Right? But CNN 4 days ago said sell Ukraine 10% of US patriots and will destroy them all. They're actually backing Zelensky's claims, and even claiming the Russians running out of missiles. Yet Kiev Independent is saying no, Russia is outproducing the US. So which do you believe, CNN or the Kiev Independent? Which one? Which one's Russian propaganda? I want to know, because I love to see the left doing mental gymnastics. Now, the Times of India have also the only other major outlet to repeat the story. And even if they sell them or destroy all the Russian ballistic missiles, what happens after you run out of interceptors? Because what will Russia do? Let's launch dummies, because interceptors don't know. Or do they? What if they can switch tactics? Use a handful of ballistic missiles to force Kiev to concentrate there. I'll give you something. Let's say Kiev did have this wide network of air defenses and a massive string across the northern border. But over time, it's been whittled down to Kiev and a few other places. And what if Russia did this by concentrating their attacks on Kiev, getting Kiev to redistribute and its air defenses, and then systematically Russia destroyed IRSTs, and later the Kiev Independent put out stories. What happened to all the IRSTs? We had 325 of them. Now not one of them's operational. Next. What if theoretically Russia purposely concentrated their attacks on Kiev and continue to do so at least once a week, so Zelensky will shit his pants and put all the patriots there, and then he'll go up and blow up something big, like an airport with full of deliveries of missiles, or like a flamingo plant, or like a drone plant that was visited not only 12 hours earlier by Lindsey Graham, or a aircraft manufacturing plant that was recently set up by Roman Metal over in western Ukraine. So, do you think it's quite possible that Russia has been manipulating Ukraine using its missile attacks? No, never. Russians aren't that smart. Stop! Overthinking this, Dave. No one's going to believe you. But I think it's highly likely that Putin has and is manipulating Ukraine using missile strikes. And that Kiev whining that if they only had a tenth of the interceptors, that they would destroy all the incoming missiles. Yeah, Putin would still have drone attacks on 80% of Ukraine unchallenged, and would use these missiles to manipulate Ukraine as he wears down the rest of the country systematically. So, let that sink in. That it's only theoretical that Russia would use an Omsk attack to systematically destroy Ukrainian cities until they submit. And Ukraine will say, never! Even though we now know that Zelensky has a escape plan to Spain if the the escalation, if the Russians had the Russians not cut off Kiev, yes, he would have escaped to Spain. And if he does, and there's still believe that a genuine belief amongst most Ukrainians that Zelensky flies out every night with the media. So they call him the homeless president because he's never home. Now, Russia has launched a number of missiles today, including allegedly destroying an unmanned crew production facility in the coastal city of Odessa and struck other infrastructure facilities along the Black Sea. Of course, not one of these attacks was reported by Ukraine. Ukraine has cracked down once again on Christianity in Ukraine, and the bishop, after his illegal arrest and detention, he issued a telegram statement condemning the Ukrainian actions, and RT picked up on it and published it. So again, every time Ukraine fucks up, Russia will publish it. Everyone will denounce it as Russian disinformation, but that statement will slowly wear thin, and eventually you'll wake up and realize that every time the left bark Russian information, why do they bark? Why? Why? Because the spanked monkey squeals. That's why. The Russian forces have put out a rare footage of what it looks like with an FAB 500. Now, this is only 500 kilograms. This is, let's see, what's five? So, take your average consumer car, cut it in half, and that's that's two FAB 500s right there. That's about the weight. Half a pallet of bricks. Now, as you can see, there's secondary and tertiary explosions. There goes a Ukrainian. What's at the Ukrainian command center? Drones. Those drones have explosives on them. Had explosives on them. The command centers where the explosives are finally put onto the drone. You don't. Yeah. We have seen enough Ukrainian propaganda where soldiers in the battlefield are putting the drones together in the battlefield with straps. Now, that's a Kinzhal on a MiG-31 interceptor. Because of its ability to fly high and fast, it gives the interceptor the minimum airspeed so that it doesn't have to have a booster accelerator on it. The plane is the booster to get it to minimum flight dynamics of missiles are quite high compared to jets, and jets' flight dynamics are quite high compared to prop aircraft. Now, Russia has pounded Ukraine's oil facilities in revenge for today's attacks. Now, those attacks went through Sunday to Monday morning, hitting facilities in Kiev. As of a short time ago, Kiev was allegedly under attack, but not one report. Now, here they're saying Kremenchug, Kryvyi and Odessa. I think they're using the Russian names for some of these towns. Or, in the Polvo region, Again, oil refineries, metallurgical plant. This is the one run by Romanthal. The Germans are increasingly taking over plants in Ukraine. They're running out of expertise in Ukraine. Wonder what's happening. Could it be that men are waking up one morning and going, hey, the hell these bitches are fleeing, why can't I? No. Only 5,446 went to Russia out of the 10 to 12,000 that left Ukraine last month. I mean, how many of those were probably truck drivers who and don't forget, how many hundreds die every day trying to escape Ukraine? It's not a concentration camp, no. Because concentration camps have orchestras and swimming pools, don't they? Now, yeah, they carried out group strikes, aircraft and missiles, and combined with rocket forces, they attacked interceptor drones and anti-air drone facilities. They attacked the Flamingo plant, as they called it, the Wunderwaffen. No, German for wonder weapon, hey? Flamingo. This is a file photo from way back when the first one was delivered. No, created by Ukraine, I swear they were not. No, they're not made in Britain and shipped to Ukraine. Get the propaganda right. They're made in Ukraine, we swear, says the British Ministry of Defence. Yeah. So the propaganda continues. But at least one of the songbirds they pay to sing their songs for them, allegedly $7,000 a month, by the way. So if you're out there proposing all these wonderful things for Ukraine, are you paid? Because she was made the key operative word, however. Because remember, you can be an LGBTQ activist and be a spokesperson for Zelensky as long as you don't bring up his violation of LGBTQ rights or any rights for that matter. Now, when I say LGBTQ rights, I mean the right to be LGBTQ, which is one of the predominant rights that UN alleges, and that Russia says, no, you don't. So you actually have so many similarities between Russia and Ukraine, and not many similarities between Europe and Ukraine. Hell, Europe and Poland, or Poland and Ukraine is so. Again, she does not want to be a political project used for someone else's nonsense and sick imagination. Yes. So pretty much she's done as a Ukrainian propagandist. No, I don't think so. I think she's back on the. I think she'll be back on the payroll. That they can't afford to lose activists like her, because pretty young girls get pretty young boys in the West to get all horny and excited for Ukraine. And she has actually lured people to Ukraine in the past to go fight for Ukraine. Right now, I do believe Sweden is using Ukrainian soldiers. Sweden and Finland have used Ukrainian soldiers as fellow Vikings in their claims. Well, actually, the only Viking, actually, the Moscow was the largest. You know that? Moscow was the largest Viking enclave outside of the UK. There were more Vikings outside of Denmark and Sweden, by the way. And most of the Vikings were actually on the Norwegian coast. There weren't that many in Sweden, by the way. Look, Sweden's landlocked. Or Finland. There were more in Denmark, by the way, than Sweden or Finland. There weren't that many. Norway was the most, mostly in the north. But there were more in northern Scotland than all of Norway and Denmark. And Moscow was the next largest. It's one of the few, right? They dragged their boats down into the Russian waterways and made their way to Moscow. And that's why there's Swedish similarities with ethnic Russians, because ethnic Russians only make up 118,000 out of the 149 million Russian citizens. only a tiny minority are ethnic Russians, just like a tiny minority in Britain are ethnic Brits. It's like a tiny minority are ethnic Scottish. Says that as an ethnic Scot myself. No. So when it comes to native rights, do you absolutely have any idea? Yeah. No, you don't. Or the history of various native groups, of which the Vikings are not an ethnic group. It is a profession by Nordics. Yes, a profession. Vi, see, king. Sea king. It was a double entendre before there were double entendres. Because it wasn't. Because Sea King had very connotations you can't mention on YouTube. But you know what Vikings got up to. Somehow the group activities that they engaged in, the wide-scale criminal activities they engaged in, nowhere near Genghis Khan's level, by the way. It's funny, isn't it? Genghis Khan did more group activities than the Vikings, but the Vikings did engage in group activities for much longer than the Mongols did, and so yeah, they terrorized Britain. They terrorized France, by the way. That's the Normans. France gave up territory to them. That 100 Vikings stormed Paris and in return got almost half of France. That's also why the Normans died out so quickly. Yeah, I know. They're rambling on. Should come to an end. But just saying, when it comes to historical context, I think a lot of people don't understand like what the three-finger salute is. That's the trident of Ukraine, is the group activities carried out by Greeks when they settled Crimea, which was now second peoples to settle Crimea, and the longest settlement in Crimea are the Tatars. And they are considered now ethnic Crimeans. Has anyone out there, and has any of these native rights groups asked the ethnic Crimeans what they want? Or the ethnic people of Donbass? Anybody? No, of course not. So the war continues because the left want their glory. And that is the saddest motive in history. Wanting others to die so that you can feel good. Well, if you want to feel good, how about you go read to old folks? How about you clean out some toilets? Or how about you pick up all that trash in your local park? Or stop throwing trash on the streets in the first place? How about you stop taking drugs? How about you put real effort into your job? You want to feel good about yourself? How about you do your job? Let's start with something basic. Be polite to your siblings. How about that? Let's start with the basics, shall we? How about use some common manners, even when you're ordering takeout? How about you stop treating McDonald's employees like trash? How about you stop fighting in Waffle House over the syrup? Hey? You want to feel good about yourself? Let's start with the basics. Let's clean up the backyard before you want to clean up other people's backyards. And as for Ukraine, they started a war. Let them lose it. Let Europe have all those refugees. Don't fund a single cent. Don't fund them. Don't rescue them. They have to learn the hard way. Because right now, the left are barking mad. I'm telling you. So thank you for watching. Please like, share and subscribe, and please support my channel. You can support me on Ko-Fi, Patreon, buy my books, buy my merch. All my links are in the link tree, which you can find in my profile, video description, or scan the QR code on the screen. Now, I appreciate each and every one of you, especially those who watched the video this far. See you in the next one. Bye for now.